Right, welcome back to the Fragments video. So where we left off the last time was an app that looks like this. So we've got our items listed, and you can see that if I click on one of the items, it's nicely showing there. So what I want to do for this video, well, before we start with the rest of this, I want to add some real data in here so that it doesn't say item 1 and description for item 1. So I want you to go to this link, bit.ly, and then go to arrays.xml. And if you open up that link, you will see that it goes to an arrays XML. So this will then be our choices, the chess pieces for the king, the queen, the bishop, the knight, the rook, and the pawn. And then from there on, there's descriptions for every one of them. So it's two parallel arrays, and I'll show you now how to implement this in our application. So you can just basically download that XML file, and then if it's downloaded, pause the video, quickly download that, and when you're done downloading, we'll come back to the video. Right, so back at the video, let's go and paste that file. So that file that you just downloaded, copy that arrays XML file, and I want you to go into your resources folder, go into values, and paste it there. So you're going to say paste in your values folder. It's going to be arrays XML, and you're going to say OK. So it will look like this. There's your arrays XML, and you can see this is also another way to create static arrays inside of your application. So you can just declare an array of the specific type. In this case, it's a string array. The name of the array will be pieces, and you can place in a lot of these item tags, and that will basically be at position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth for your array called pieces. And then we also have a string array called descriptions, with also item tags. Now these are a bit long item tags because it's descriptions for the chess pieces. So what we want to do is to, instead of saying this is item 1, item 2, item 3 there, we will show the chess pieces here, and if you click on them, it shows the description. Okay, so let's see how we can change our coding to quickly implement these arrays instead of this descriptions there. So instead of saying array list there at the top, let's declare a string array. So we'll just declare a string array there at the top. So I'm in the main activity currently. So instead of saying descriptions equals a new array list, we can then set this one now to get resources, and that refers back to your resources folder, dot get string array, and then we're going to say r.array, and if you put the dot there, you'll see your two arrays that we have in that arrays.xml. So this one is the description, so we're going to refer to the descriptions there. Okay, so and then we actually do not need these adds anymore, and we'll just go there. Instead of saying descriptions.getIndex, we'll just have the block brackets there without the dot and passing in the index. Okay, so this part is done. So this descriptions variable is declared as a string array because in my arrays XML I have a string array called pieces as well as a string array called descriptions. And in the main activity we're linking up to the descriptions part. So then we'll say get resources.getStringArray and refer back to that array called descriptions. Right, so now let's go to the list frag. So in the list frag, we also created an array list there. So instead of calling it an array list called data, let's also make it a string array called data. And instead of saying new array list there, we do the same thing. We say get resources.getStringArray, and we refer to the array by saying r.array. And then in this case, it's the pieces. Right, so instead of saying data.add there, we can remove that. We already have the data, and there we pass it in, so it should work. Let's see how it works now. I'm going to run it quickly. Let's look at the app. Right, so you can see that we've got a list of the chess pieces now, and when you click on king or queen or knight or bishop or rook or pawn, we will see those data displayed for that specific one that we clicked. So if you click on knight, you'll see the description for the knight. Okay, so that's just a bit more complete example on what we try to achieve here. Okay, so now at this stage, we've got our application looking nice. We've got the list view, and when we click the list view, everything works on that side. But if I place my phone again into portrait mode, then portrait mode does not look good at all. So we can't have our phone look like this. So what we want to do now is to have, when it's in portrait mode, we'll only have the list view here. And then when I click on an item on the list view, it must show the detail view. Now, in order to achieve this, let's go into our resources folder. So what we need to do now is to go and create another layout folder, and I'll explain this now. So you're going to right click on your resources folder, and you're going to say new and go to directory. And then the name that you need to have here is called layout land. So your phone will automatically decide which layout file or folder to go into depending on in what mode your specific phone is. So if it is in landscape mode, it will take all your layouts inside of your layout land folder. And if it's in portrait mode, it will go to the normal layout folder. So we're going to call a folder layout land, and make sure that you call it exactly like I have it here. And then say OK. And you can see that now under layout, you don't see the layout land folder. But if you can go to, in mine is on the desktop Android projects, if I go into my project folder, you will see that you actually have two folders there, one called layout and the other one called layout land. And we'll see that now. So what I want you to do now is to go to activity main, go into the text tab at the bottom, and we're going to give this linear layout an ID. So we'll just say Android ID. We're going to use the plus ID there, and I'm going to call this one, let's start this one as the portrait mode. So I'm going to say layout underscore portrait. Right, so this layout file will be my portrait layout file. So it's called activity underscore main, and the ID for it is portrait. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this file, copy it, and I'm going to go into my layout folder. Or let's try inside of the resource folder, and I'm going to paste it there. But now instead of going to the layout, the normal layout folder that we have there, I'm going to go to the three dots, and you'll see there's a layout land folder. So you'll see there's a layout folder and there's a layout land folder. So you go into that one and say open. That's where I want to place it. So make sure then that you can see that it goes to the directory in your folder, app source main resources layout land, and you can see there's the layout land folder now, and you say OK. Now you'll see the difference now. If you go into layout, you'll see that there's, for the activity main, there's two layout files. One is the normal one and one is in the land folder. So what happens if your application starts, and I run this application now, and the phone is in portrait mode, it will use this layout. So that's the layout it will use. But if the phone is, if I put the phone in landscape mode, it will go to the layout land folder automatically and use this layout. So that happens automatically when you put it in the correct folder. Now at this stage, both files are exactly the same, so we will not see a difference. So remember for your activity main XML, and now see the difference between the two files. This one says land activity, and that one says layout activity main. So you can see it's in two different folders. Now the one that says layout activity main, we called it layout portrait there. So for this one that's in the land folder, so just to make sure that all of your activity mains are closed, and just open up the one that says land in brackets. Okay, so this one will be layout. Let's make this one land. So now we know this one's ID is layout land, that one's ID is layout portrait. Okay, so for the rest, actually, we're going to leave it as it is, and we're going to refer in coding back to these two different layouts. So in coding, we can now go and say, or we can basically go in coding and see which one did the Android system choose to display by checking if the layout file is null or not. Because if the file is null, it means that that one didn't load. So if let's say the phone is currently in your landscape mode, then activity main will be null. But activity main XML with the land, this one, will not be null. Okay, so this is basically what we're going to do in coding also. So in the main activity, after our descriptions has been declared, let's go and see how we can do this now. So I'm going to have an if statement there. So remember, this is when the main activity starts. Just after it started, we will do this if statement. So I'm going to say if find the view by its ID, and we're going to say r.id.layout, and you remember that we called one land and one portrait. So let's look at the portrait one for now. So we're going to say if the find view by ID r.layout portrait is not equal to null. So if it's not equal to null, if that layout was loaded and it's not equal to null, then we know the phone is in portrait mode. Okay, so the else, or another if statement that we can do here, if the find view by its ID, r.id.layout land is not equal to null, then we know the phone is in landscape mode. So I hope you understand this concept. So the phone will automatically choose which one of these two layouts to basically load, depending on the mode of the phone currently. So we're testing here, if the layout portrait one is not equal to null, it means that the phone loaded the layout portrait instead of layout land. But if this one is not null, we know the phone loaded layout land and not layout portrait. Okay. So now what we're going to do then is to use the fragment manager. So you're going to use the fragment manager of the support version 4 app library, and let's call it manager, equals this dot get support fragment manager. Then on that manager object, we will begin a transaction. And normally how this works, you'll begin a transaction and then you'll do a few things and then you save the changes on what you did. So I'm going to start with, so just go to a new line. I'm going to start with the hide method first, so you can see that we can hide a fragment now. I can hide a fragment, or I can also show a fragment. So in this case, if the phone is in portrait mode, I want to hide the detail fragment and I want to show the list fragment. So remember, portrait mode looks like this. This is portrait mode. So if the phone is this way, we want to show this fragment and we want to hide this fragment. So which one do we want to hide? I'm going to go to manager dot find a fragment by its ID, and now I don't think we have given our fragments IDs. So let's just quickly go, before we carry on with that, let's go to fragment list quickly. Actually, not in this file. Let's go to the main activity. So in activity main XML, the first one, this one we called list frag, that one we called detail frag. So actually we did that in the previous video. If you go to this one, you can see this one is called list frag and that one is called detail frag. So everything was done for us in the previous video. Right, so we can refer to them by referring to the list frag and the detail frag. So I'm going to go to the one that we want to hide. If it's in portrait mode, we want to hide the detail fragment. So I'm going to say r.id.detail frag. That's the one I want to hide. Which one do I want to show? So I'm going to go to manager dot find the fragment by its ID, r.id.listFrag. And then after that, we'll just call commit to save everything that we've done so far. Right, so basically this fragment manager will help us now to begin a transaction and hide the detail fragment and show the list fragment when the phone is in portrait mode. Now let's go to the other side. I'm going to copy and paste these lines of coding. So I'm going to copy it and we paste it there. So now on this side, if the phone is in landscape mode, like this now, so this is landscape mode, you can see that we do not want to hide any one of the fragments. We want to show both of them. So instead of having the hide there, I'll have two shows there because I want to show both the detail fragment as well as the list fragment. Now let's run this quickly, and you'll see that these highlighted values here are just saying that it could be null. So you can actually test if this manager.find fragment by ID is not null, then we hide it and we show it. But that's up to you. So I'm going to run this quickly and see if we leave our phone now in portrait mode, what will the app do for us? Right, so you can see that our fragment is currently showing correctly. So we have a list or a list of items here, but when I click it, nothing happens. So now it's showing correctly, but when I click, nothing happens. If I put it in landscape mode, you can see now it shows this fragment and this fragment, both of them. But as soon as I go to portrait mode, it will only show the list view. So this is what we did now with these two pieces of coding. Now the next part is, if we click now an item here, then we want to show that item on the other fragment. Right, so where does that happen? So in this onItemSelected method is what happens actually when the user clicks here in the list fragment. It goes to onListItemClick, and then we activate the onItemSelected method in the main activity. So as soon as that item gets selected, yes, we can set the text. Remember, that fragment is in memory, so setting that text will be 100% correct. No problems there. So what we can do then, we can test here. If again, the find fragment by ID or find view by ID, r.id.layout portrait, if it's in portrait mode, then we do that. Because if it's in landscape mode, everything works fine. So this is only when it's in portrait mode. So I'm just going to say there is not equal to null. So again, we can have that comment there. If the phone is in portrait mode, let's copy that one. So again there, your phone is now in portrait mode. So only if the phone is currently in portrait mode, then we want to do what we're going to do now. So I'm going to use this fragment manager again. I'm going to copy that, paste it there, and we'll have the fragment manager again. We will begin the transaction. Actually, we should have copied the other one, but it doesn't matter. So we're going to hide in this case, the list frag. So let's just change the show and the hide there. That one we can have show, and this one should be hidden. So when the item gets clicked, this method will run, and we will show the detail frag but hide the list fragment, and then see how it works. Okay, so let's run it. Right, so now we have a slight problem. As soon as the application starts, we are already in the detail view. Now, why is that? So if you remember in the list frag, we said that we wanted to actually run this line there right at the beginning to select the first one, and that's actually what happened. It's like we clicked it already. So just comment out that line for now, and let's run it again so that we don't click the very first item right at the start. Right, and there you can see there the app runs, and we've got the list of all the chess pieces again, and if I click on the king there, it takes me back to this one. Okay, now if I click on the back button, it actually takes me out of the activity, which is not what we want, so we'll fix that now. So let's just run this app again, Fragments, just open it up again, and let's put it in landscape mode now. So now you can see the problem is now where we click, it still works 100%, but we see the word text view there when we start. So let's just quickly correct this part. So in order for this to work correctly, we will have a slight if statement here, or small if statement here, and we're just going to say if this dot get activity, that gets the activity that's hosting this fragment. In this case, it is our main activity. Dot find the view by its ID, and we're going to refer to r.id.layout, in this case, portrait. So if the phone is currently in portrait mode, not equal to null, then we can run this coding. So I'm going to copy that or cut it there and paste it. So actually, I think let's make this equal to null, because we want to have it if the phone is in portrait, or if the phone is in landscape mode. I'm just going to add this here. The phone is in landscape mode. So if portrait is null, we know it's landscape. Unless you want to say, let's do it land there again, and then we can say not equal to null. That's the same thing. Okay, so if the activity is currently in landscape mode, then we want to have it clicked already. Otherwise, we do not want it. So let's try this out again. Right, so now you can see when the app runs, we've got that nicely figured out again. Now, if I go back to this one, you can see it's not clicked. So if I click there, it takes me back to this one. So the only problem we have left is when we click on the back button, and now it goes out of the application instead of going back to the list view. Now, in order to correct that, we'll just go back to the main activity, and there where we said where we click on it, we will add there just one extra line there. So we'll say add to backstack, and we're just going to pass in the null value there, and that will allow us to go back to the list view. So I'm going to run this quickly again. Right, so if I click on one of the items there and I click on the back button, it goes back to the list view. Now if I click on the pawn, I can see the pawn. If I go back to the knight, I can see the knight's description, and so forth. So now if we put the phone in landscape mode, you can see everything is working 100%. Right, and that is the end of Fragments. I hope that you understand Fragments after this example.